Have you ever wondered if you're secretly broke compared to everyone else your age? Maybe you're lying awake at 3 in the morning scrolling through your banking app, wondering how your college roommate just bought a house while you're still trying to figure out why your credit card balance keeps growing despite your best intentions. Or perhaps you're at a dinner party listening to someone casually mention their savings account balance, and you're sitting there thinking, well, at least I have savings in my checking account for about 12 minutes after payday. Look, today I'm going to serve up some brutal reality about what the average 30-year-old's finances actually look like. And trust me, some of these numbers are going to make you feel either significantly better or significantly worse about your situation. But here's what matters. By the end of this breakdown, you'll know exactly where you stand compared to your peers. More importantly, you'll understand that if you're struggling financially, it's not because you're failing. It's because you're facing economic realities no generation has dealt with before. The game has changed, and nobody bothered to update the rulebook. Drop a comment right now and tell me, reality check. Let's get into the brutal truth. Starting with the debt that's destroying an entire generation's future. Let's start with the debt that's quietly destroying an entire generation's financial future. Student loans. And I'm warning you right now, these numbers are going to make you angry, especially when you realize this wasn't the deal your parents got. According to the most recent federal data, the average 30-year-old is carrying $42,000 in student loan debt. $42,000. That's not what they borrowed. That's what they still owe after years of making payments. To put this in perspective, that's more than many people's annual salary, and it represents debt that most 30-year-olds will be dragging behind them well into their 40s. Here's where it gets brutal. The average monthly payment on that $42,000 is about $436. That's $436 every single month that can't go towards saving for a house, building an emergency fund, investing for retirement, or frankly just enjoying your life. It's money that disappears into the federal loan servicing system for the next decade, assuming you're even on the standard 10-year repayment plan. But that's just the obvious part. What I'm about to say is what makes the difference between people who eventually escape this trap and people who stay stuck forever. A huge percentage of 30-year-olds aren't even on that standard repayment plan because $436 a month feels impossible on top of rent, car payments, and just trying to exist. They've switched to income-driven repayment plans that sound like a lifeline but often become a trap. These plans lower your monthly payments, which feels like relief until you realize your loan balance is actually growing because your payments aren't even covering the interest. Let me tell you about Michael, and this represents millions of 30-year-olds across the country. Michael is 31, works as a software engineer, and earns $75,000 a year, which sounds pretty good, right? He's definitely above average for his age group. But Michael has $65,000 in student loans from his computer science graduate program. When he first graduated, he chose an income-driven repayment plan because the standard payment seemed overwhelming. His monthly payment was $420, which felt manageable. But here's what happened over the next 3 years that absolutely nobody warned him about. Despite making every single payment on time, Michael's loan balance grew from $65,000 to $68,500. Think about that for a second. He paid $420 every month for 36 months. That's over $15,000 in total payments. And he somehow owes $3,500 more than when he started. His payments weren't even covering the interest that was piling up like snow in a blizzard. The psychological impact of this cannot be overstated. Imagine being responsible, making your payments, doing everything you're supposed to do, and watching your debt grow. It's like running on a treadmill that's slowly tilting backward. You're working harder and harder just to stay in the same place. There's an ancient biblical teaching about debt that hits differently when you understand Michael's situation. It says, "The wicked borrows and does not pay back, but the righteous is generous and gives." But here's the modern twist that nobody talks about. Michael is paying back. He's doing everything right. And the system is still designed to keep him in debt longer. In ancient times, the inability to pay debts meant servitude. You literally became a servant to your lender. Today's 30-year-olds face a modern version of this. They're not physically in chains, but they're trapped in jobs they can't leave, cities they can't afford to move from, and life decisions they can't make because of this debt hanging over their heads. When Michael finally realized what was happening and switched to the standard repayment plan, his monthly payment jumped to $780 because now he was paying on that higher principal balance. That's over 15% of his gross income and about 20% of his take-home pay after taxes. Suddenly, buying a house wasn't just difficult, it was mathematically impossible. His debt-to-income ratio made him unqualified for a mortgage, even though he was paying more in student loans than many people pay for their actual mortgages. Here's your actionable step, and this is critical. If you're on an income-driven repayment plan, log into your loan servicer account right now and look at your actual balance compared to when you started. I'm serious, do it today. If your balance has grown despite making payments, you need to reassess immediately. Even if you can only afford an extra $50 or $100 per month, put it toward the principal. That extra amount, even if it seems small, can save you thousands in interest and years of payments. Calculate what you'd pay in total under your current plan. Most people are shocked to discover they'll pay 1.5 to 2 times their original loan amount by the time they're finished. If you borrowed $40,000, you might end up paying $80,000 total. That's $40,000 in pure interest. Here's a story that illustrates what's possible when you understand the real cost. I know a woman named Jennifer who was on an income-driven plan, paying $320 monthly. Her balance was growing slowly and she felt helpless. Then she calculated that at her current pace, she'd be paying for 25 years and would pay $96,000 total for loans that originally were $40,000. That calculation made her angry enough to take action. She found a side gig doing freelance work on weekends that brought in an extra $400 monthly. She threw every penny of it at her student loans, not the minimum payment, but specifically requesting it go to principal. Within 4 years, she was completely debt-free. She told me, "The day I made my final payment, I felt lighter than I had in a decade. It wasn't just about the money. It was about finally breaking free from something that controlled every decision I made." The principle here is powerful but hard to accept. Student loan debt is a chain that gets heavier every year you ignore it or make minimum payments. The system is designed to keep you paying as long as possible because that's how lenders make money. Your only way out is to attack it aggressively, even when it feels impossible. Real talk. How much student loan debt are you carrying right now? Drop a number below. No judgment, just curiosity. Sometimes it helps to know you're not alone. But student loans are just one piece of the debt puzzle destroying 30-year-olds' financial futures. Credit card debt tells an even more insidious story, and it reveals something that nobody wants to admit. This isn't about financial irresponsibility. It's about the gap between what you earn and what it actually costs to just exist in modern America. The average 30-year-old is carrying over $4,000 in credit card debt. Now, $4,000 might not sound catastrophic compared to those student loan numbers we just talked about, but credit card debt operates completely differently. We're talking about interest rates averaging around 22% annually. That means a $4,000 balance costs you almost $900 per year just in interest payments. Money that literally vanishes into thin air without reducing your balance by a single penny. But here's what's really happening with credit card debt for 30-year-olds. And this is where the story gets more complex and frankly, more relatable. This isn't debt from buying designer handbags or taking luxury vacations to Bali. This is debt from the reality of being 30 in America today. 30-year-olds are using credit cards to cover basic necessities that previous generations could afford with their regular income. We're talking about groceries when your paycheck doesn't stretch as far as you thought, car repairs that can't wait until next pay period, medical expenses that your high-deductible health plan decided weren't actually necessary, and yes, occasionally some retail therapy after staring at your student loan balance and wondering if you'll ever be free. Let me tell you about Sarah, who represents the median 30-year-old experience almost perfectly. Sarah is 30, works in marketing, and earns $58,000 annually, which puts her right at the national average for her age group. She's been making student loan payments for 8 years now, and she also carries $3,800 in credit card debt. Now, before you start thinking Sarah is financially irresponsible, let me break down exactly how she accumulated this debt, because this is where the story gets real. $1,500 came from her car transmission failing 6 months after her warranty expired, because apparently car parts have a supernatural ability to sense the exact moment you're no longer covered. $800 accumulated from medical expenses when she had to go to urgent care twice in 1 year, and her high-deductible health plan decided that being sick was clearly a lifestyle choice she should pay for out of pocket. The remaining $1,500 represents what financial experts euphemistically call lifestyle inflation, but what Sarah calls trying to maintain my sanity while adulting. This includes things like occasionally buying groceries without checking her bank balance first, replacing her laptop when it crashed during an important work presentation, and yes, sometimes ordering takeout after working a 10-hour day because the alternative was crying into a bowl of cereal. And what I'm about to say is what makes the difference between people who escape this trap and people who stay stuck in it for decades. Sarah's minimum credit card payment is about $120 monthly. But here's where the mathematics of being 30 gets really depressing. At 22% interest, if Sarah only makes minimum payments, she'll be paying off this debt for over 18 years. 18 years. And she'll end up paying more than $8,000 total for that transmission repair and those urgent care visits. Think about that. She'll pay more than double what she originally borrowed, not for investments or assets, but for things that already happened and are long forgotten. Benjamin Franklin once wrote, "Beware of little expenses. A small leak will sink a great ship." But here's the modern reality Franklin never faced. When your ship is already taking on water from student loans, rent that consumes 38% of your income, And car payments, those little expenses, aren't luxuries, they're survival. The leak isn't from carelessness, it's from trying to bail out a boat that has holes you didn't make. The real problem isn't that Sarah lacks financial discipline. The real problem is the mathematical impossibility of her situation. She's spending 38% of her take-home pay on rent for a one-bedroom apartment, another 15% on her car payment and insurance, and roughly 10% on student loans and credit card payments combined. This leaves her with extremely limited funds for building an emergency fund, which means the next unexpected expense will likely end up on a credit card too. It's a vicious cycle designed to keep you trapped. You can't save for emergencies because you're paying off the last emergency. And without emergency savings, the next crisis becomes credit card debt, which creates more minimum payments, which prevents you from saving, which guarantees the next emergency goes on the card. It's a hamster wheel that spins faster every year. Here's your actionable step, and I need you to do this today. List every credit card you have along with its interest rate and balance. I'm talking physically, write it down or type it into your phone. Then arrange them from the highest interest rate to the lowest. That highest rate card, that's your enemy. That's the one stealing your future the fastest. Pay minimums on all the others, but throw every extra dollar you can find at that top card. Even if it's just $25 extra this month, do it. Once that first card is paid off, take that entire payment amount and roll it into the next highest rate card. This is called the avalanche method, and it's mathematically the fastest way out. Here's a story that brings this home. I know a man named David who had $12,000 spread across 4 credit cards. He felt completely hopeless, like he'd be paying them forever. Then he got angry enough to take action. He started a side hustle, delivering food on weekends. Nothing glamorous, just driving around in his free time. Every penny from that side work went straight to his highest interest card. 18 months later, he made his final payment. He told me, "Every dollar I put toward that balance felt like buying back my freedom." When I made that last payment, I actually cried, not from sadness, but from relief I didn't know was possible. I forgot what it felt like to not owe anyone anything. The principle here is crystal clear. Credit card debt is renting money at outrageous rates. You're paying 22% annually to borrow money for things that are already gone. Stop paying rent on your past and start building equity in your future. Be completely honest. How much of your credit card debt came from actual emergencies like car repairs versus emergencies like needing takeout after a soul-crushing day at work? Comment emergency or sanity below. I promise this is a judgment-free zone. Now let's talk about the issue that makes every other financial problem feel even more hopeless. Housing. Because this is where 30-year-olds today face perhaps the most dramatic departure from what previous generations experienced. And it's fundamentally altering the entire timeline of adult life. The home ownership rate for adults under 35 has dropped to just 37%. Let that sink in for a moment. That means nearly 2/3 of 30-year-olds are still renting. Not by choice, not because they're irresponsible, but because home ownership has become mathematically impossible for most people their age. The average home price in America is now over $500,000. $500,000. To put this in perspective, that means a typical 30-year-old would need a $100,000 down payment just to put 20% down and avoid private mortgage insurance. $100,000. Most 30-year-olds don't have $100,000 in their entire net worth, let alone sitting around available for a down payment. But wait, it gets worse. And I need you to follow the math here, because this is where the dream completely dies. Even if you could somehow scrape together that $100,000 down payment, maybe through family help, years of aggressive saving, or selling a kidney on the black market, the average mortgage interest rate in 2024 was around 6.7%. That means monthly payments on a $500,000 house with 20% down would be approximately $2,400, and that's not even including property taxes, insurance, or maintenance. $2,400 per month. Remember Sarah from earlier? Our median 30-year-old earning $58,000 annually? Her take-home pay after taxes is probably around $3,800 monthly. A $2,400 mortgage payment would consume 63% of her entire take-home income. Financial experts recommend spending no more than 28% of your gross income on housing. For Sarah, that would be about $1,350 monthly. But here's the cruel joke. You can't find housing for $1,350 in most markets where jobs actually exist. This is why so many 30-year-olds are stuck paying $1,800 to $2,000 per month in rent, spending 40 to 50% of their income on housing. Not because they're making poor choices, but because those are literally the only options available. And every month that rent payment disappears into their landlord's pocket, building absolutely zero equity for their own future. There's an ancient parable about a wise man who built his house upon rock and a foolish man who built upon sand. When the storms came, the house on rock stood firm, while the house on sand collapsed. But here's the modern twist nobody talks about. Today's 30-year-olds can't build on rock or sand. They can't build at all. They're forced to rent space on someone else's foundation, perpetually one lease renewal away from being priced out. The psychological impact of this housing situation cannot be understated. Previous generations viewed their 20s as the time to get established and their 30s as the time to buy a house, start a family, and build wealth through home ownership. Your parents probably bought their first house in their late 20s. Your grandparents might have bought one even younger. But today's 30-year-olds are watching their rent payments disappear month after month while home prices rise faster than their ability to save for down payments. They're trapped in this bizarre financial limbo where they earn too much to qualify for first-time homebuyer assistance programs, but too little to actually afford homes in the areas where their jobs are located. Many 30-year-olds find themselves paying rent that's higher than mortgage payments would be, but unable to access home ownership because of down payment requirements and debt-to-income ratios destroyed by student loans. It's like being told you can't have a library card because you haven't returned enough books. The logic is circular and infuriating. This housing crisis is fundamentally altering life timelines. People are delaying marriage because combining two sets of student loan payments doesn't improve anyone's debt-to-income ratio for mortgage qualification. They're postponing having children because raising kids in small rental apartments while paying off debt feels financially irresponsible. They're watching their peers in lower-cost areas buy houses and start families while feeling trapped in expensive cities where their careers exist, but home ownership remains a fantasy. Here's your actionable step, and this one requires brutal honesty. Calculate what you're actually spending on rent annually. Multiply your monthly rent by 12. That number, whether it's $21,600 or $24,000 or more, is money that's gone forever. It's not building equity. It's not an investment. It's just the cost of having a roof over your head. Now, I'm not saying everyone should immediately quit their job and move to a lower cost area, but you need to ask yourself, is staying in this expensive market worth the trade-off? Are the career opportunities and lifestyle worth potentially never owning a home? Here's a story that changed how I think about this. I know a couple who lived in San Francisco, both working in tech, paying $3,200 monthly for a one-bedroom apartment. They did the math and realized that at their savings rate, they'd need 15 years to save for a down payment in the Bay Area. And by then, prices would have risen even more. They made a radical decision. They moved to Austin, Texas, took a slight pay cut, but their rent dropped to $1,600 for a two-bedroom apartment. Within 3 years, they bought a three-bedroom house for less than they were paying in annual rent in San Francisco. They told me, "We thought we were giving up opportunity by leaving. Instead, we found a freedom we didn't know existed. We're not just surviving anymore. We're actually building something." The principle here is powerful but uncomfortable. Sometimes the smartest financial move isn't playing by the rules. It's changing the game entirely. Home ownership might not look like what your parents experienced. It might mean relocating, house hacking, or waiting longer than you planned. But staying stuck in an expensive rental market, watching your money vanish while telling yourself you're where you should be, that's not a strategy. That's just expensive denial. What percentage of your income goes to rent or mortgage right now? Just comment with the number. Don't calculate it if you don't want to face reality yet. I'm genuinely curious if anyone is actually at the recommended 28% or if that's just a myth. But perhaps the most shocking statistic about 30-year-old finances isn't about debt at all. It's about savings. And I'm warning you right now, these numbers are going to make you question everything you've been told about financial responsibility. According to financial experts and those cheerful planning websites, 30-year-olds should have the equivalent of their annual salary saved by age 30. So if you're making $60,000 a year, you should theoretically have $60,000 sitting in savings accounts and investment portfolios ready to compound into a comfortable retirement. Ready for the reality check that's going to make your stomach drop? Only 14% of Americans have at least $100,000 in savings, and that includes people of all ages. More than half of all Americans can't cover an unexpected $1,000 expense without going into debt. Let me repeat that because it's crucial. More than half of people your age cannot handle a $1,000 emergency without borrowing money. We're not talking about a major medical crisis or losing your job. We're talking about your car needing new tires or your laptop deciding to die at the worst possible moment. $1,000. And most 30-year-olds don't have it. The average retirement account balance for people in their 30s hovers around $14,000. $14,000 to fund potentially 40 years of not working. Using the traditional 4% withdrawal rule, that $14,000 would generate about $560 annually in retirement income. That's $46 per month. $46 monthly wouldn't cover a cell phone bill, let alone housing, food, healthcare, and all the other expenses that come with being alive. Yet this is where most 30-year-olds actually are, not where the financial advice columns pretend they should be. There's an ancient fable about an ant and a grasshopper. The ant worked all summer storing food while the grasshopper played and enjoyed himself. When winter came, the ant survived on his stored provisions while the grasshopper starved. The moral? Plan ahead. Save for the future. Work hard now so you're secure later. But here's the modern version nobody tells you. The ant worked all summer, but 40% of everything he gathered went to rent. 15% went to student loan payments for the education he needed to get the job. Another 10% went to his car payment because you can't work without transportation. And what was left barely covered food and basic necessities. The ant wanted to store provisions for winter, but there was nothing left to store. And still, everyone kept telling him he should have saved more. The gap between financial advice and financial reality for 30-year-olds has become so wide, it's almost comical. Financial planning websites cheerfully suggest that 30-year-olds should be saving $800 monthly toward retirement alone, not counting emergency funds or other savings goals. $800 monthly for someone earning the median income of $58,000. That represents about 25% of their take-home pay after taxes. Meanwhile, back in the real world, that same person is spending 38% of their income on rent, 10% on student loans, 5% on credit card minimums, and trying to maintain a social life that doesn't involve exclusively eating ramen noodles alone in their apartment. The idea of having $800 left over each month for savings exists in the same fantasy realm as affordable healthcare and reasonable college tuition. Here's your actionable step, and this might be the most important thing I say. Forget the shame about where you are right now, seriously. The financial shoulds were designed for an economy that no longer exists. Your parents could save more easily because they weren't paying $42,000 in student loans. They weren't spending half their income on rent, and their dollar went significantly further. Start where you are, not where some expert says you should be. Can you save $25 per week? That's $1,300 per year. In 10 years with compound interest, that becomes over $16,000. It's not the $60,000 you're supposed to have, but it's $16,000 more than you have right now. Set up automatic transfers, even tiny ones. $50 every payday, $20 per week. Whatever amount won't break your budget, but will actually happen consistently. The goal isn't to match some arbitrary standard set by people who don't understand your reality. The goal is progress, not perfection. Here's a story that illustrates what's possible when you let go of shame and focus on progress. I know a 32-year-old named Jessica who had exactly $800 in savings and felt like a complete failure. Every financial article she read told her she should have $60,000 plus by now. The shame was paralyzing. She felt so far behind that savings seemed pointless. Then she did something radical. She forgave herself. She started automatically transferring $20 every week to a separate savings account. Not because it would make her catch up, but because it was what she could actually do. 2 years later, she had $2,400 in her emergency fund. Then her car broke down. $1,800 repair. She paid cash without touching a credit card. She told me, that $2,400 saved me from $5,000 in credit card debt and years of stress. I'm still not where I'm supposed to be, but I'm not drowning anymore either. Small progress is still progress, and progress is what actually matters. The principle here is powerful. You cannot build wealth on a foundation of shame and comparison to standards designed for a different economic reality. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. Financial freedom isn't built in one giant leap. It's built one small, consistent decision at a time. Without looking at your bank account, be honest. Could you cover a $1,000 emergency right now without using a credit card? Just comment yes or no. No explanations needed, no shame. I just want to see the reality versus what we're told we should have saved. So there you have it. The brutally honest financial reality of being 30 in America today. Student loans average $42,000 with balances that actually grow despite making payments. Credit card debt over $4,000 at 22% interest from car repairs and medical bills, not luxury vacations. Housing costs that make home ownership mathematically impossible for 2/3 of your generation. And savings that fall catastrophically short of where experts say you should be. But here's what I need you to understand. If these numbers made you feel worse about your situation, you're missing the point. You're not failing at a fair game. The game itself is rigged. Previous generations had lower costs, higher purchasing power, and economic opportunities that simply don't exist anymore. Comment reality check right now if this opened your eyes to the fact that you're not alone in this struggle. Sometimes the most powerful thing is realizing that your financial stress isn't personal failure. It's a generational economic shift. Pick one thing to improve this month. Extra $50 towards your highest interest debt, $25 per week to emergency savings, automating even a tiny transfer. Progress over perfection, that's what actually builds wealth. And hey, share this with a friend who needs to hear they're not failing. The system is, your struggle is real. Your effort matters. And small steps forward still count as moving forward. You're doing better than you think.